to the car cult. Imagine a world where you have the freedom of personal transportation, but with the ability to take to the skies to avoid that pesky rush-hour traffic. There is no car that has become more associated with this wonderful idea than the DeLorean. So why did this unique car end up destroying the DMC Motor Company and become a fan favorite that nobody bought? On this episode of the History of Cars, we explore the extraordinary fall from grace of the DeLorean Motor Company. To show your support for the Car Cult channel, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification icon to keep up with our latest videos. Chapter 1. The Rise of John DeLorean. We start our story of the DeLorean Motor Company with its mercurial founder, John DeLorean. John was aptly born in Motor City, Detroit, Michigan, in 1925. John, like so many young men at the time, was drafted into military service and would earn an honorable discharge in 1946 after serving 3 years in the U.S. Army. After completing his degree, he would take a number of engineering jobs before he would land his first big job at Packard, an engineering company making highly precise automatic transmissions. He would quickly make improvements to their flagship product, the Ultramatic automatic transmission, before he caught the eye of General Motors and was offered a choice of jobs at any of GM's 5 divisions. John would choose to work at GM's Pontiac division and would go on to produce dozens of patented innovations for Pontiac. Before being promoted in 1961 to chief engineer, John went on to design the Pontiac GTO, which was named after the legendary Ferrari 250 GTO. Under John's stewardship, Pontiac reached 3rd place in annual sales in the United States, and he was rewarded with a promotion to head of the Pontiac division in 1965. John was only 40 at the time, and he began to struggle with being out of the garage and in the executive office. John began to enjoy the celebrity status that came with his position, and he spent much of his time traveling around the world to support promotional events. But this only enhanced John's standing in GM, which was seeing flagging sales across the brand. He would be promoted again, this time to head up GM's premier Chevrolet marque. John's time at Chevy was an astounding success, with John taking the division to record sales of in excess of 3 million cars, which matched the entire Ford Motor Company at the time. John's successful turnaround of the Chevy division would lead to him being appointed the vice president of car and truck production for the whole GM business. It seemed his continued rise up the GM business seemed inevitable. However, the idea of John becoming president of GM was unbearable for many other GM executives, and on April 2, 1973, he announced that he was leaving GM, that the rumors persisted that he had been fired. Chapter 2. DeLorean Motor Company is born. John was not the type to go quietly into the sunset, and soon after leaving GM, he would form his own car brand, the DeLorean Motor Company. DMC would show off a 2-seat sports car prototype in the mid-1970s. The DeLorean safety vehicle had an exterior designed by DeLorean. The car was made of a distinctive stainless steel body. Think of the Tesla Cybertruck, and featured gull-wing doors. The futuristic design became a favorite of car critics and the public. The car would enter production as simply the DeLorean and was powered by the Dovan V6 engine, developed jointly by Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo. Oddly, the car was not built in the United States, and production of the new car started in Dunmurry, a suburb of Belfast in Northern Ireland. The major draw for DMC to operate from the Northern Ireland was the significant financial incentives of £100 million offered by the Northern Ireland Development Agency. Renault was contracted to build the factory and to make the engines for the DeLorean, with Lotus designing the chassis and bodywork details. There would be 3 different concept vehicles proposed by DMC before the company would hit the brakes. First was the DMC-24, which was intended as a 4-seater sedan, which would retain the distinctive shape of the DeLorean, including the gull-wing doors. One design had 2 doors with the cabin and doors stretched to allow rear entry and rear seating. Think of a Rolls-Royce, Wraith, or Koenigsegg. The other four-door design was produced as a rolling mock-up by Ital Design and was based on the Lancia Medusa concept car. The next concept car was called the DMC-44 and was proposed as a lightweight 4x4 off-road vehicle. A tubular frame prototype was created and a promotional video was made to attract investors. The final and wackiest vehicle was a DMC bus called the DMC-80. The company produced a promotional brochure for public transit corporations. It's fair to say if DMC was still alive today, it would have a back catalog of some of the most innovative and weird cars of any brand. However, there was bad news ahead for DMC. Chapter 3. The DeLorean runs into trouble. The DeLorean experienced significant production delays and only started deliveries in January 1981, which turned out to be a bad time to release a new car, as the United States was experiencing an economic recession in 1980. The DeLorean also received lukewarm reviews from car critics, with a higher price and lower horsepower compared to other sports cars on the market, being particularly unpopular. The unique design of the DeLorean was not enough to push the car to success, and whilst the Chevrolet Corvette sold in record yearly numbers of 40,000 cars in 1980 and 1981, by February 1982, only half of the DeLoreans produced at the time were sold, and DMC found itself in $175 million of debt, and the Dunmurry factory entered into receivership. The Dunmurry factory would eventually build around 9,000 cars, and the American Express catalog would even list a DeLorean plated in 24-karat gold. Originally 100 were planned, but only 4 were ever purchased. In January 1982, the British government discovered that DMC had built just 8,500 cars, and almost half of the funds that had been provided to them as subsidies, the equivalent of £23 million, had been transferred to an overseas account in Panama. The company stated that they intended to use the funds to subsidize Lotus, but the funds would never make it there. The factory was seized by the British government. On October 19, 1982, John was arrested in the United States following a sting operation where he was recorded by FBI agents agreeing to bankroll a cocaine smuggling operation. The FBI would arrange for more than 59 pounds of cocaine worth $6.5 million in 1982 in a hotel near Los Angeles International Airport. He would be set up by a neighbor, James Timothy Hoffman, who said he had heard John say he needed $17 million in a hurry to prevent DMC going into insolvency. John would manage to escape prison when he was able to argue that the FBI and DEA had unfairly targeted and entrapped him into a criminal conspiracy, simply because he was financially vulnerable at the time. By the time his legal issues had been resolved in August 1984, DMC had already collapsed into bankruptcy, and with it, John's reputation in the car world. John would go on to quip, "Would you buy a used car for me?" Chapter 4. The DeLorean is out of time. It may be odd to be talking about a car and car company that only existed for 7 years, but the mark that the DeLorean has left on the car world and in popular culture is undeniable. That is, thanks to a little movie trilogy called Back to the Future. In it, the DeLorean would be converted into a time machine by Doc Brown. DMC would have already closed by the time of the release of the first movie, but this would only add to the prestige of the DeLorean. In the first movie, 6 DeLoreans would be used throughout the production, along with a fiberglass model where the full-size DeLorean was required to fly on screen. The cars had the original V6 engines, but the sound used in the movies would be from a V8 from the Porsche 928. 2 of the cars used in Back to the Future, Part 3, would be fitted with Volkswagen engines and dune buggy chassis for filming the western scenes. The DeLorean would get its time travel ability from the flux capacitor, which allows the car to travel to the past or future, but not through space. In order to unlock its time travel ability, the car would have to accelerate to 88 miles per hour. Interestingly, the production version of the DeLorean had a speedometer that only went up to 85 miles per hour, and the production team would have to modify the speedo in order to hit the magical 88 miles per hour. The time machine is electric, which requires a power input of 1.21 gigawatts, or 1,620,000 horsepower, and is powered by a plutonium-fueled nuclear reactor. Only 3 of the cars still exist, with Universal Studios owning 2 of the cars. The third car, used in Part 3, was restored and sold at auction in 2011 for $541,200. You can see a fully restored DeLorean from the movies at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles. After some years away from the spotlight, John would attempt to relaunch DMC and gave interviews describing a new vehicle called the DMC-2. However, it was not meant to be, as the DMC name was purchased by a Texas-based firm, which provided parts and restoration services to existing DeLorean owners. The DeLorean would not only be immortalized in the Back to the Future movies, but also on the tombstone of John DeLorean when he died from a stroke at the age of 80 in 2005. On a future episode of History of Cars, we may dive into the crazy world of John DeLorean. Let us know in the comments if you would like to see a video on this. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification icon to keep up to date with the latest from the Car Cult channel. Until next time on Car Cult.